is already high, bleaching the horizon into a pale, merciless white. Dust hangs in the air like smoke that never clears, coating uniforms, weapons, teeth. Captain Giovanni Rinaldi, Italian Army logistics officer attached to the Axis coastal defenses, squints through binoculars from a low ridge overlooking the road. What he sees makes no sense. The road below, little more than packed dirt winding through scrub and rock, is alive. Not with tanks, not with infantry columns marching on foot. Trucks, hundreds of them. They come in steady intervals, olive drab shapes growling forward in long, uninterrupted lines. 6x6s, 2.5s, fuel tankers, flatbeds stacked with crates, ambulances bouncing over ruts without slowing, jeeps weaving between heavier vehicles like insects around cattle. The sound reaches him a moment later, a deep rolling thunder of engines, layered and constant as if the desert itself has learned to hum. Rinaldi lowers the binoculars slowly. "Madonna," he mutters. Beside him, Tenant Carlo Bassi shakes his head in disbelief. "They haven't stopped," he says, "since dawn." They watch another column crest the rise, then another appears behind it, and another behind that. This is not a build-up for a single attack. This is movement as a state of being. Only days earlier, Allied forces had landed along the North African coast in what Axis intelligence dismissed as a risky gamble. Poor ports, limited infrastructure, long supply lines stretching across the Atlantic. In Rome, staff officers had assured one another the Americans would bog down, just as everyone did in the realities of desert war. But here outside Iran, reality looks very different. Rinaldi has spent the past year fighting shortages, fuel rationed by the leader. Trucks cannibalized to keep a few running, infantry units marching because transport simply does not exist. Every movement planned not around tactics, but around what can physically be carried forward. He knows what an army without trucks looks like. This is not that. An American convoy slows briefly as it passes a bend in the road. Dust clouds roll outward, momentarily obscuring the vehicles behind. The lead truck pauses, only for seconds, while a military policeman gestures, redirects traffic, keeps the flow moving. Then it resumes. No confusion, no hesitation, just motion. Italian artillery officers nearby begin counting aloud, then stop. The numbers grow meaningless. 100, 200, more. "These are not reinforcements," Bassi says quietly. "This is how they fight." Farther down the road, American soldiers ride standing in truck beds, helmets loose, rifles slung casually. They are not hunched with fatigue. They are not conserving energy for lack of transport. They are being carried forward. Rinaldi feels a tightness in his chest that has nothing to do with the heat. In Libya, his units had waited days for ammunition deliveries that never came. At El Alamein, Italian infantry advanced on foot while German armor surged ahead, only to stall when fuel failed to arrive. Entire offensives had collapsed not because of enemy fire, but because wheels stopped turning. Here, the wheels never seem to stop. A staff car pulls up behind the ridge. An Italian colonel, face drawn and gray beneath his cap, steps out and joins them. He watches in silence for a long moment. "They told us the Americans were inexperienced," the colonel says at last, "that they lacked endurance." Another convoy rumbles past, engines echoing against the low hills. Rinaldi answers carefully. "They lack nothing, signor, except patience." Down the road, bulldozers follow the trucks, pushing aside wreckage, smoothing ruts, improving the route even as it's being used. Engineers leap from vehicles to lay down makeshift bridges over dry wadis. Within minutes, traffic resumes at full speed. The road is changing under their feet. The Americans are not adapting to North Africa. They are reshaping it. By midday, reports filter in from along the coast. American units appearing miles inland far sooner than expected. Supply dumps established almost overnight. Artillery repositioned in hours, not days. Infantry advancing with full rations, full ammunition loads, fresh boots. Always the same phrase appears in the messages. "Transport abundant." Rinaldi returns to his field desk and stares at his maps. Red pencil marks indicate Axis units, thin, spread, dependent on railheads that are already strained. Blue arrows, hastily drawn, represent American movements. They curve. They overlap. They ignore the distances that once defined the desert. The implication settles in slowly, like dust after a convoy passes. This enemy does not pause to gather strength. He brings it with him. As night falls, the road below remains alive. Headlights flicker on and off under blackout discipline, trucks moving by instinct and coordination. The rumble continues into darkness, uninterrupted. Rinaldi writes in his notebook by lantern light, the page already gritty with sand. "They advance on wheels," he notes, "and they have more wheels than we have men." He closes the book, listening to the engines in the dark. For the first time since arriving in Africa, he understands the danger. This war will not be decided by who holds the strongest position. It will be decided by who can move and keep moving longer than the other can endure. And tonight the Americans are everywhere. The engines do not fade with the night. They multiply. November 12th, 1942. Inland from Algiers, dawn reveals what darkness hid only partially. The desert floor is scarred with fresh tire tracks, thousands of them, overlapping, crisscrossing, pressed so deep into the soil that the ground itself seems to have been kneaded. Captain Giovanni Rinaldi kneels beside one set, fingers tracing the imprint of heavy tread. American rubber, not the thin, overworked tires he knows from Italian transport columns, patched and repatched until the canvas shows through. These tracks are wide, deep, confident, designed for this. A convoy rolls past less than 50 meters away, engines growling at low RPMs, unhurried. The vehicles are spaced evenly, disciplined, as if pulled forward by an invisible line. Each truck carries a chalk marking on the windshield, unit numbers, destinations, times. They are not improvising, they are scheduled. Rinaldi watches a group of American engineers halt briefly at a crossroads. Within minutes, signposts go up, hand-painted arrows nailed to wooden stakes. To front 8 MI supply dump 2 MI medical left, they do not ask permission. They do not wait for higher authority. They assume the road belongs to them because they are already using it. By mid-morning, reports flood Axis headquarters. American infantry units appearing where no transport should logically have delivered them yet. Artillery batteries redeploying overnight. Fuel dumps springing up in wadis and olive groves, guarded, marked, organized. Italian officers gather around maps, confusion etched into their faces. They move like water, one major says, always finding the lowest point. Rinaldi says nothing. He is thinking of something more unsettling. Water does not run out of water. At a captured supply point, he watches American quartermasters unload crates with almost casual efficiency. Forklifts, actual mechanical forklifts, hum across packed dirt. Soldiers toss tarps, stack rations, connect fuel hoses. A generator kicks on, and suddenly the entire site is alive with power. Electric light, radios, repair tools. This is not a forward position. This is a mobile rear area. An Italian sergeant nearby stares openly. "We march for 2 days to receive bread," he whispers. They drive trucks to bring ice. Rinaldi follows a maintenance crew working on a disabled American vehicle. The truck's engine has overheated, nothing unusual in this climate. But instead of abandoning it, the crew has it stripped down in minutes. Spare parts appear as if summoned. Another truck stops, then another. Tools are passed hand to hand. The truck is running again before the hour is out. No cannibalization, no desperate improvisation. Replacement. That word begins to haunt Rinaldi. In the Italian army, a broken truck is often a dead truck. Repair depots are far behind the lines. Parts must be requested, approved, shipped if they exist at all. Fuel arrives in trickles, guarded like treasure. Movement is always conditional. American movement seems unconditional. Later that afternoon, Rinaldi rides in a staff car along a road his unit struggled to use only weeks earlier. It is already improved, graded, cleared, marked. American trucks pass him going both directions. Loaded, unloaded, loaded again. They do not pause between tasks. They are never idle. At a crossroads, he sees something that forces him to look twice. A column of American infantry is advancing, not marching, but riding. Every platoon mounted, some in trucks, others in jeeps. Heavy weapons lashed down, men sitting atop crates and ammunition boxes, laughing, smoking, conserving their energy for the fight ahead. Italian infantry arrive at battles exhausted. The Americans arrive fresh. That evening, Rinaldi listens as German officers argue. They insist this is temporary, that the Americans will overextend, that ports will clog, that fuel will run dry. Rinaldi wants to believe them, but he has seen the ports. He has seen ships unloading in shifts, 24 hours a day. He has seen cranes swing endlessly, nets of supplies lowered directly onto waiting trucks that drive off without delay. The Americans are not feeding the front. They are feeding the road. And the road feeds everything else. In a quiet moment, Rinaldi sits with his counterpart from an Italian motorized unit, a unit that exists mostly on paper now. "How many trucks do they have?" the man asks. Rinaldi answers honestly. "Enough that they do not count them the way we do." Another convoy passes in the darkness, headlights hooded, engines low and steady. Rinaldi writes again in his notebook. Their officers do not ask if a movement is possible, he notes. They ask only when it will arrive. He realizes then what truly frightens him. An army that marches must stop. An army that rides does not. And in North Africa, where distance is a weapon, the Americans have brought more of it than anyone imagined. The convoy lights fade into the desert night, but the sound of engines does not. November 18, 1942, approaches to Tebessa, Algeria. The hills east of Tebessa are supposed to slow in advance. Narrow passes, broken ground. Roads that twist just enough to turn every movement into an argument between maps and reality. Italian planners counted on it. German planners insisted it would buy time. Captain Giovanni Rinaldi watches American trucks climb anyway. They come up in columns that stretch beyond sight, gears grinding patiently, engines never rushed. Drivers rotate at scheduled halts. Vehicles peel off without disrupting the flow, one to refuel, another to deliver rations, a third towing artillery that should, by all logic, be days behind the infantry. Instead, it arrives with them. Rinaldi stands beside a German liaison officer, Major Klaus Richter, who watches in silence through field glasses. Richter fought in Poland, France, Russia. He has seen blitzkrieg from the inside. He finally lowers the glasses. "This is not maneuver," Richter says carefully. "This is logistics pretending to be maneuver." Rinaldi understands what he means. The Americans are not racing ahead in daring thrusts. They are advancing on a moving carpet of fuel, ammunition, spare parts, and food. Every mile gained is immediately reinforced by what follows. There is no pause where the advance must wait for supply to catch up. Supply is already there. Italian units attempting to reposition find themselves overtaken, not by tanks, but by trucks. American infantry appears on ridgelines Italian commanders believed unreachable without days of marching. Artillery fires sooner than expected because the guns did not crawl forward. They were driven. Rinaldi receives a report from an Italian battalion commander retreating from a wadi south of Souk Aras. "We withdrew at dusk," the officer says over a crackling radio. "By dawn, American trucks were already on the road behind us." "How?" Rinaldi asks. The answer is simple. Brutal. They did not stop. That night, Rinaldi accompanies a German staff visit to a captured American supply point. It has been abandoned hastily, maps still pinned, coffee still warm in mugs, but its contents are staggering. Rows of fuel drums, tires stacked like fortifications, engines wrapped in grease paper, entire truck beds filled with nothing but replacement parts. One German NCO kicks a tire and whistles softly. "This is an army that expects things to break," he says, "and does not care." Rinaldi knows the contrast too well. Italian transport units operate on the edge of collapse even before contact with the enemy. Trucks are pooled, reassigned, stripped to keep others running. Fuel shortages turn movement into negotiation. Orders are issued with the quiet assumption that not all of them can be carried out. American orders assume compliance, because the means already exist. On November 22nd, American forces launch a sudden push southward, exploiting a gap Italian reconnaissance believed impassable at speed. Rinaldi is present when the report comes in. "Enemy infantry and guns advancing rapidly," the message says. "Estimated arrival 6 hours." 6 hours. Rinaldi stares at the map. On foot, the terrain would take 2 days. With Italian transport, perhaps 1 if fuel holds. The Americans arrive in 5. Their trucks crest the ridge in the late afternoon sun, dust clouds rising behind them like banners. Engineers are among the first forward, immediately improving the road even as the column passes. Traffic flows both directions, some vehicles delivering troops, others already carrying wounded and empty crates back. Nothing moves one way only. This is when the Italian officers stop speaking of bravery or tactics. Their discussions shift to something colder: math. How many kilometers can they advance before fuel becomes a problem? How many trucks would it take to stop them? How many do they lose per day? The answers are unsettling. Fuel does not become a problem when depots move with the army. Trucks are replaced faster than Axis air or artillery can destroy them. Losses are absorbed invisibly because behind every convoy is another already en route. Rinaldi watches an American column halt briefly to allow another to cross. There is no shouting. No confusion. Military police wave vehicles through with practiced gestures. Even the pause feels rehearsed. He writes again that night. "We believed war here would be decided by who could move fastest across empty land," he notes. Instead, it is decided by who can bring the land with them. German officers still speak of counterblows, of concentrating armor, of cutting supply lines. Rinaldi sees the flaw. You cannot cut a line that is 10 lines wide, constantly shifting, constantly replenishing. By early December, Italian units begin abandoning trucks not because they are destroyed, but because there is no fuel to justify keeping them. American forces seize these vehicles, repair them, and put them back on the road within days. Even Axis trucks begin serving the American advance. At a final briefing before his unit withdraws again, Rinaldi hears a senior Italian colonel speak with a bitterness he has never heard before. "They do not advance like an army," the colonel says. "They advance like an economy." Rinaldi looks at the map one last time. Every arrow points west to east. Every arrow is supported by roads crawling with trucks. And for the first time since the campaign began, he understands that the desert, the great equalizer of war, has chosen a side. It favors the army that never stops moving. The desert favors the army that never stops moving. January 30th, 1943, near Faid Pass, Tunisia. Dawn comes hard and white over the flats east of Faid. The air is cold enough to sting the lungs, the ground frozen just enough to punish tired suspension. Captain Giovanni Rinaldi stands beside his staff car, collar turned up, watching dust rise where there should be none. No engines are audible yet. That worries him. The Americans arrive before the sound does, columns appearing over the low rise like something poured rather than driven. Trucks first. Always trucks. Long-nosed Chevrolets and GMCs, canvas sides flapping, headlights hooded but useless in full daylight. They do not bunch. They do not hesitate. They spread, flow, and reform without stopping. Behind them come tanks, artillery, more trucks. Rinaldi counts out of habit. He loses track quickly. The Axis plan for Faid is straightforward on paper. German armor will strike first, break the American front. Italian units will exploit, occupy, hold. The desert will slow American reinforcement long enough to make the blow decisive. That assumption is already collapsing. Reports flood in from forward observers. Enemy artillery already deployed. Enemy infantry arriving in strength. Enemy supply vehicles visible behind front line. Behind the front line, Rinaldi turns to a German captain beside him. How are they already here? The German does not answer immediately. He watches another column peel off toward a wadi, trucks kicking up dust as engineers jump down before the engines stop. They never left, he says finally. They were already moving. The first engagement goes well for the Axis. American units are pushed back. Tanks burn, prisoners are taken. German officers are quick to claim vindication, proof that American troops are inexperienced, brittle under pressure. Then the trucks arrive. By mid-morning, American artillery that should have been out of range is firing again, new guns freshly emplaced. Ammunition is plentiful. Infantry reappears on ridges cleared barely hours before. Rinaldi watches an Italian company prepare to advance, only to halt as American trucks roll past their intended axis of movement, disgorging troops who immediately dig in. They are reinforcing while retreating, one lieutenant mutters. That night Axis forces consolidate, expecting the Americans to pause, regroup, recover. They do not. American convoys move under moonlight, guided by blackout markers, engines tuned low. Trucks arrive at units that were in contact less than 12 hours earlier, delivering hot food, ammunition, medical supplies, replacement radios. Some units receive replacement vehicles before dawn. Rinaldi overhears a German staff officer snapping at a driver. "You cannot drive all night," the officer insists. "The men will collapse," the driver shrugs. "Then we switch drivers. It is not bravado, it is procedure. By February, the pattern is unmistakable. Every American setback is temporary. Every Axis success feels hollow. Terrain gained in the morning is contested again by evening, not by desperate infantry, but by fully supported formations that seem to materialize out of the sand. Italian transport officers are blunt in their assessments. "We cannot outrun them. We cannot outmaneuver them. We cannot exhaust them." Rinaldi accompanies a German planning meeting where maps are crowded with red arrows meant to represent decisive strikes. An Italian colonel interrupts quietly. "Where are the trucks?" he asks. The room goes silent, because there are not enough of them. Fuel shortages force Axis units to choose between moving armor or supplying infantry. Ammunition deliveries are delayed. Wounded wait longer. Repairs are improvised or abandoned altogether. Meanwhile, American vehicles move freely, sometimes wastefully, sometimes inefficiently, but always in numbers that forgive error. On February 14th, during a sudden American repositioning south of Esbatla, Rinaldi sees something that finally strips away illusion. An American infantry battalion relocates nearly 20 kilometers overnight, not by marching, by truck. Every platoon arrives together. Every weapon arrives with them. Mortars, machine guns, radios, all present, all functioning. Italian units attempting the same movement arrive piecemeal, exhausted, missing equipment, officers forced to guess what they will have when contact is made. That difference compounds. Rinaldi writes again, the tone of his notes no longer analytical but resigned. "We believed speed came from daring. They have proven it comes from abundance. By March, Axis positions are increasingly static, not by choice but necessity. Movement is risk without fuel. Withdrawal means abandoning equipment. Counterattack becomes theoretical. American forces, by contrast, maneuver constantly, not always brilliantly, but relentlessly. They shift weight faster than the Axis can respond, not because of superior tactics, but because every order assumes transport exists. And it does. In a final conversation before his unit is pulled back yet again, Rinaldi speaks with a German officer who has stopped pretending. "They fight with engines," the German says. "We fight with courage." Rinaldi nods slowly. Courage is not the problem. The problem is that courage does not move an army across North Africa in days. Trucks do. And the Americans have more of them than the desert can swallow. The Americans have more trucks than the desert can swallow. April 20th, 1943. Outside in Fidaville, Tunisia, spring reaches Tunisia almost unnoticed. The desert does not bloom here, it hardens. Dust turns to powder. Roads become ruts carved by weight and repetition. Captain Giovanni Rinaldi stands on a low ridge overlooking what remains of an Axis supply route and finally allows himself to stop pretending this is temporary. Below him, American traffic moves steadily east, not surging, not racing, flowing. Trucks pass in both directions, some hauling artillery forward, others carrying wounded west. Fuel tankers move at intervals so regular they could be timed with a watch. Military police wave vehicles through intersections that do not exist on any map. This is not improvisation, this is infrastructure. Italian positions around Fidaville are still formidable. The terrain favors defense. German guns are well sighted. Italian infantry holds ground with discipline. On paper, the Americans should have to pause, regroup, build depots. They do not. Depots arrive with them. Rinaldi visits a German command post where maps are now crowded not with arrows but with numbers, fuel estimates, ammunition tallies, vehicle availability. Every column is circled in red. Shortage. A German logistics officer admits what everyone already knows. "We are not losing because we cannot fight," he says. "We are losing because we cannot move." The Americans exploit this mercilessly. They probe, withdraw, shift axes. Each movement forces Axis units to respond, burning fuel, repositioning guns, wearing out vehicles that cannot be replaced. When resistance stiffens, American units simply appear somewhere else, already supplied, already supported. Italian counterattacks arrive late or under strength, sometimes both. Rinaldi watches an Italian motorized battalion attempt to reposition under air threat. The convoy is small, precious. It is spotted almost immediately. American fighter-bombers tear into it, destroying trucks that cannot be spared. By nightfall, the battalion has lost more vehicles than men. American losses that day are higher but invisible. Burned trucks are towed away. Replacements roll in before the dust settles. On April 28th, Rinaldi is present when an Italian general speaks plainly for the first time. "They are not stronger soldiers," the general says quietly. "They are better supplied." No one argues. By early May, Axis positions begin collapsing in earnest. Not from catastrophic defeat, but from exhaustion. Units run out of fuel. Ammunition dwindles. Orders arrive that cannot be carried out because there is no way to move men where they are needed. American columns advance on multiple axes simultaneously, trucks enabling flexibility the Axis simply cannot match. Rinaldi witnesses the end not in a dramatic last stand, but in a traffic jam. An Axis column halted by its own broken vehicles, trucks with empty tanks, guns without tractors, men sitting in the shade waiting for orders that will never come. American trucks bypass them entirely, dust swirling, engines humming, drivers barely glancing at the defeated enemy. On May 13, 1943, the surrender comes. Rinaldi lays down his sidearm beside thousands of others. He is not bitter, he is not surprised. As he stands among captured officers, he watches American logistics units move in almost immediately. Roads are cleared, traffic flows. The war does not pause for victory, it simply continues forward. Months later, in captivity, Rinaldi will explain it simply to another Italian officer who still speaks of missed opportunities. "They were never short of trucks," he says. "Not once, not anywhere." The officer shakes his head. "So many?" Rinaldi nods. "Everywhere we advanced," he says, "they were already there." And that is the lesson the desert taught him. Wars are not won only by who fights best. They are won by who arrives first and keeps arriving. End.